Hi everyone, so today I will be sharing my novice thoughts to The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. So this is going to be the continuation of my novice series to The Hobbit plus The Lord of the Rings. For The Lord of the Rings, the video is divided into 3 volumes as the story is also divided into 3 volumes. Before I get started, I would like to say that there will be a section in this discussion / chat where I will be talking about spoilers. But before that, I would remind people so that people who hasn't seen the movie or read the book will not get spoiled if they don't want to. As I got all the basic information out of the way, let's just get started. So the first thing I noticed about this volume is that it gets a bit easier than reading The Hobbit and the Fellowship of the Ring. I remember when I read The Hobbit, it was really challenging. Like, I've never seen any writing style like this. Granted, I was more of a non-fiction reader, and when it comes to fantasy, I usually read YA or stories that are released in the modern times. So the vernacular is something that I really need to get used to. And for the Fellowship of the Ring, there's just this special kind of challenge, which is the poems and the songs. As a non-native reader, there are just some vocab that I have no idea what this means. So that will be like the unique challenge of the Fellowship. But I was quite surprised that The Two Towers feels like a breeze for me. And after I actually checked the Lexile score of The Two Towers, it's actually less difficult than the Fellowship of the Ring. So maybe that also makes sense why it's a little bit easier for me to read. So for new readers, if you feel like you're getting into either The Hobbit or you just got into the Fellowship and then you feel like, oh my god, this is impossible, I would say that it will get easier here in The Two Towers. So if you would just hang in there and continue with The Two Towers, this is really the time where you could get a little bit of a breather. And as I remembered, this book doesn't have the poems and the songs, at least in terms of quantity, it's decreased. So people who might have like a problem with that, or people just skip the song altogether in the Fellowship of the Rings, when you read The Two Towers, that problem is also solved. Oh, and also like the second big important thing about The Two Towers is that the pacing is rather quicker than the Fellowship of the Ring. So I mentioned in my Fellowship video is that the one thing that made people not enjoy the Fellowship as much is the slower pacing, whereas that problem is also solved in here. So the pacing in The Two Towers is rather quicker than the Fellowship, which I could see that a lot of people will be able to appreciate. And not only the pacing itself that is faster, it has more variation to the setting as well. And other important or points that are worth noting about The Two Towers is that the way that it's being structured is really easy to follow, in my opinion. So in the first volume, which is the Fellowship of the Ring members are often put in one scene together, whereas in this book, in majority of times, they are divided. So they are divided into 3 big groups, if I'm not mistaken. So there's like Merry and Pippin as one group, and then there's the Tree Hunters, and there's also Sam and Frodo. And you know, Gandalf is Gandalf. He could go anywhere. So because there are these subgroups of the Fellowship, Tolkien was able to have more settings. So like one subgroup is in location A, the other is location B, the other is location C. So Tolkien was able to have more opportunity to render more different places. And because, let's say, Merry and Pippin is in location A, that location A history, culture, and context is much more detailed and explored in depth, which I really think that it's a really good point just at the beginning of the book, because that place A is explored in such a detailed way. I'm already being sucked into the story. And this form of storytelling really works for the Two Towers. It really makes the pacing feels quicker, but at the same time, it's not that quick to the point that the changing perspective, the changing setting is confusing or anything for new readers. So Tolkien is able to balance between his very in-depth and in-detail writing style, but at the same time makes the readers engage in his story. Not only this type of structure is really great in my opinion, is also because it helps the readers to be much more intimate with each of the characters. So in the Fellowship, my criticism, well, possible criticism, because I mean, this story is amazing, but perhaps the thing that I kind of like wish more to see is that I get more glimpse of the characterization of each of the Fellowship rather than just certain members. So I would confess this. When I read The Fellowship of the Ring, it might be just the problem of my very limited imagination. But sometimes when I read The Fellowship, I just forgot that there's these members. Like a lot of times, I'm so sorry, Mary stands. And I'm so sorry, Mary. I feel really bad even saying this. Sometimes I forgot that he's there because he's not saying anything. And like, I mean, when it comes to the movies, it's easy to remember that, okay, there's Mary, there's this, because we could see his head, we could see like, you know, his back. But like in the book, as for someone who have a limited imagination, sometimes I just forgot that he's there because he is not really doing anything. He's not in the dialogue, he isn't being described or anything. But that problem is also solved in here, and I'm very happy about that. And I figured that the professor knows what he's doing, so I was really glad when he finally have this structure, have the Fellowship having this like subgroup, so that the members who aren't as active in the story, maybe not active in the story, not really get a lot of spotlight from one scene to another, finally gets their spotlight. Even though it's a bit sad that the Fellowship has to split into like 3 subgroups, but at the same time, it really gives each of the members a much more intimate view. And of course, this structure of storytelling implies even another positive point, which is basically richer world building. As I mentioned, Tolkien has much more opportunity to have more variation to the setting. Also, it really shows in detail about the relationship of each of the groups. So I'm going to go into a spoilery section here. If you wouldn't want to be spoiled, I advise you to skip this into this time frame, and I will add a time frame here at the bottom so it's easier for you. But if you're okay with spoilers, this is going to be territory that has spoilers. So in the beginning, Merry and Pippin were found in Fangorn Forest, and they met Treebeard, and basically in this scene, Treebeard, Merry and Pippin shared like a very in detail dialogue about the history of the forest, the history of the ants. I wouldn't imagine that this will be able to be implemented if there would be like 9 people in the scenes. The intimateness of it, I think, will be decreased. So this is one of the proof that this kind of structure is really working for the Two Towers. And especially that there is this context that Treebeard is a character that has a nature that's like deliberate and wouldn't necessarily be trusting into strangers. So if I imagine if there's 9 individuals, Treebeard will feel less inclined to spill his tea. I imagine if you add characters like Legolas, I don't think it would be totally have the same feelings, especially that Legolas might know a thing or two about trees. So if there's him, there's a possibility that sense of newness in the narrative is diminished. So in this scene, there's Merry and Pippin, someone who's just kind of like very new into the context of the Fangorn Forest, they basically represent the reader's view. So it is very appropriate. It is very easy to relate to Merry and Pippin's lens when they talk to Treebeard, especially as a first-time reader. Alright, so the relationship between each members of the Fellowship of the Rings is really interesting to read as well. This book literally shows that the hobbits, Merry and Pippin, or Sam and Frodo, is literally inseparable. The book also provides way more contextualization when it comes to each of the relationship between the hobbits. So like the volume really shows that Pippin, who's usually a bit childish, mischievous, troublemaker, really takes that strategic side in him for his best friend who is sick, who is hurting. So Pippin was the one who takes care of him, even able to fight his fear in order to help someone who is very dear to him, almost reminding me of Bilbo's journey in The Hobbit, like how his increasing courage helps him in helping Thorin and the company. So I found this type of like showing how the characters care for each other as a really good example in storytelling. How to show the reader that the characters care for each other rather than telling them that the character cares for each other, rather than just having a shortcut with dialogue. Of course, writers can also use dialogue for the characters to show that they care for one another, but Tolkien was able to have both dialogue and action as a tool to show that characters cares for each other. And Tolkien also used dialogue as a mechanism to show that two characters care for one another. I can't believe, when I read this to dialogue, I literally need to take a moment because it was super beautiful. Basically, that scene where Legolas and Gimli. So I'm a sucker for characters having their own I loves you. So they tell to one another that they love each other, but by not literally saying I love you. So they have like their code of that. Like for example, like the Fault in Our Star has like okay, that dialogue. And this one, Legolas and Gimli has their own, like, yeah, I really care about you. I think you're very important to me. And that's basically, yeah, you're weird, but you comforted me. I mean, that's not verbatim, but it's their way, it's their version of saying that you're really important to me. And oh my god, I literally have to stop reading the book and then just kind of like seeps in the moment, because that's just I just think that that's really beautiful. Okay, so when it comes to talk about Tolkien, I read some criticism that points out that Tolkien only creates like characters that are goody two shoes, and I'm like, no way, because this book provides one of the characters that's just obviously not goody two shoes, but at the same time not yet totally bad, because there are actually times that he could have turned good, which is Saruman. Of course, when it comes to the spectrum, I do think that he's much more in the dark side. And there's this one scene about him and Gandalf. He's still hoping that Saruman will actually turn to the light. There's still like there's still grace for Saruman that is given by Gandalf. And then and then one dialogue I remember, Saruman just basically didn't trust Gandalf, and then Gandalf just gave him like the best burn ever, which is the treacherous are ever distrustful. And I think that's like, wow, oh my god, Gandalf, that's everything. I'm using that from now on. And yeah, like perhaps more of a question, especially if like there's more experienced senior fans in here. How does the wind is being like symbolized in the Lord of the Rings? Because like I noticed that when the Fellowship sang, when they lament about Boromir, they kind of like missed out the east wind. They kind of missed it out before Gimli said that, hey, it's my turn, but like it's the east wind and I kind of don't want to sing it. So like what is it? Does the east wind kind of like symbolizes evil? Because I believe in mythology it does symbolize evil, but does it apply in here as well? So I think that's quite an interesting thing that I noticed in here as well. Okay, so I guess that's the end of the spoilery section of this video. And if being asked would I recommend this book, I would absolutely recommend it. If I have to rank between the enjoyment of reading Tolkien's work from The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, or The Two Towers, I would say that The Two Towers is my favorite volume to read because the structure, I mean, I have been gushing about the structure. Do I have any criticism? I don't think so. Maybe one criticism is that I don't really get to spend the time where the fellowships are together, but at the same time I couldn't really be mad about that as well because I love to have more moments with each of the fellowships. I just love the intimateness of how the structure provide, and also the pacing is much more to my personal liking, but at the same time it still has a really rich world building and interesting character like Saruman is much more highlighted in here. Also the relationship, come on, the relationship, perhaps this is just a gush. As someone who is much more of a character driven reader, this is everything. This is a total gift for me. So I'm gushing over The Two Towers. So yeah, if you feel that the pacing of the first is a bit slower for your liking, there's too much poems and song, don't give up because this will solve that. And I remember that the first time when I read this, I thought it was gonna be just a filler book, more contextualization, and then there's not going to be like a real progress going, and I was glad that I was super wrong. The scenes are really memorable. I really feel the soul of the story in this one. And I remember that I wanted to start The Return of the King as soon as I'm done with The Two Towers. So yeah, in conclusion, really enjoyed. The pacing is great, the characters are great. Of course, the structure is the one that make all the difference, how the fellowship is divided. So there's much more focus. This book really cemented my respect for Tolkien as a writer. So that was it, my novice chat about The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I hope that this discussion will help you in determining whether this is worth your time. Let me know in the comment section below if you're planning to read this volume. You read The Hobbits, Lord of the Rings. Will you be planning to continuing? Or if you read this, please share your thoughts. Which volume of The Lord of the Rings is your favorite? Before I sign off, I would like to thank everyone who made it to the end. Thank you guys so much for watching. May your tea will always be warm for reading.